Speaking of Black History Month
and
mediocrity. So
Yeah, great
here
meeting.
is Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro. He's got quite does he do this for the Daily Wire? Is that
He founded the Daily Wire.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Which is like a Daily Caller millennial type vehicle.
Okay, I see. And he's got a very interesting. He's got a sort of a nice set, actually. So, and he does a show every day. Probably a show very similar to this. His set may be a little bit nicer than ours, but that's okay. And here is Ben Shapiro picking up the mantle. Again, I said this many times, when Republicans get into this much power, when they control every lever of government, that's when you start to see the culture wars ratchet up, because they don't want you to pay attention to the fact of what they're doing or not able to do with government. In fact, we see Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump's strategy. Now, Ben Shapiro, is he a never Trumper?
He's sort of. He's like an off and on.
He's also Trump curious.
He also doesn't like Trump derangement syndrome.
He doesn't like Trump derangement syndrome. Now, here is Ben Shapiro adopting Donald Trump's strategy of building his profile. Can you guess what he's going to talk about? But I bet you can't guess on just how hilariously he's going to do it.
Everyone in the media is talking about the most important thing that has ever happened in the history of humanity, or at least since Caitlyn Jenner became a woman, a transgender woman. And that, of course, is the release of Black Panther. It is so deeply important. It is, we've heard it's deeply important to millions of Black Americans who, after all, were not liberated from slavery 200 years ago and liberated by the civil rights movement with federal legislation. And
Pause it for 1 second. There's a lot to discuss up to this point in the piece. I can't tell. Is he reading off of something, or is there something? Does he have a situation with his eyes?
He's probably reading off prompter.
Now look, I don't. I mean, if he's reading off a prompter, God help everybody here. And I'm not. Look, I'm not going to sit here and mock someone because he's because of his eyes shift back and forth in some weird way.
That's for Michael Mondays.
That's for Michael Mondays. But I guess my point is just like, you have a nice set, so you clearly understand the importance of the visual product that you're doing. Maybe we should just stick to radio, Ben. But here's the other thing. I really should look past the superficial and get to the content. It was not 200 years ago that slavery ended in this country. It was, in fact, closer to 150 than 200. Now, what's 30 or 40 years of slavery between friends? That's not going to mean anything. And it was all the way back in the 1960s when you got civil rights. So I don't know why all that's important. It's not like blacks haven't gotten everything they ever wanted. You've had almost full participation from a legal standpoint, almost, let's be honest, for almost now 65 years. Man, out of the 200 plus years of the existence of our country. God, what more would you want?
Yeah, and they haven't...
A movie?
They haven't had any extrajudicial executions by police in at least 3 weeks.
No, yeah, of course. Like now look, you got those cell phones that take the video of it.
Also, just to correct you, in Ben Shapiro years, this country's been around for 300 years.
300 years, okay. And all right, so let's continue.
Liberated from slavery 200 years ago and liberated by the civil rights movement with federal legislation have not been gradually restored to what always should have been full civil rights in the United States.
Pause it. You know what's interesting is that these black people, why do they have to get liberated twice? They got liberated after slavery, and then they got liberated again with the Civil Rights Act of 1965. And they have gradually, they have gradually been established to almost like where you're full-class citizens. God, but continue.
Gradually restored to what always should have been full civil rights in the United States. I mean, none of that has mattered up till they made a Marvel movie about a superhero who is black in a country filled with black people. That's the change, right? Blade was not enough. Catwoman with Halle Berry, no. Okay, Wakanda is where it is.
All right, pause it. Now look, I feel so petty in moments like this, but if you're gonna do this Dutch angle or whatever, the MTV thing where like for some reason we're gonna shoot you talking to a camera from which we're not going to shoot, like where this is what it looks like if you were in studio watching him talk to someone besides you.
Standing weirdly close to him at an angle.
Let's work on what's going on with the neck. That's all I'm saying here. I mean, I just sort of feel like
Ad hominem.
it's worse than ad hominem what I'm doing here. It's petty, but I can't focus on what he's saying because there's shaving issues.
Harry's razor.
Harry's razor. Use the coupon code majority.
Oh, wow. I just noticed that.
Yeah, no, that's the first thing I saw. I was like, wait, what's all right, but whatever. All right, continue.
Okay, Wakanda is where it is. This is the most important moment in black American history. Not Martin Luther King, not Frederick Douglass, not the Civil War.
Pause it. Just so you know, Martin Luther King was a person, not a moment in black history. Frederick Douglass, same person, not moment, but go ahead.
More people know that.
I mean, is this written out? It's hard to say. It definitely is hard to say.
Not the end of Jim Crow, none of that. Not Brown versus Board. The most important thing is that Chadwick Boseman puts claws on his hands and a mask on his face and runs around jumping off cars in CGI fashion. Deeply, deeply important. Black children everywhere will now believe that they too can be superheroes who jump off cars in fictional countries.
Pause.
It's very
Now, Ben seems to have accidentally, I think, come across the notion of like, yeah, actually there's some value in having role models. And, for generations, when you would see African Americans in movies, they were usually the criminals.
Isn't Sidney Poitier enough, Sam?
Right. Sidney Poitier. That's right. I stand corrected.
They too can be superheroes who jump off cars in fictional countries. It's very important. Now, you may sense that I'm mocking a little bit. The reason I'm mocking a little bit is because I hate this kind of identity politics. I think it's incredibly
pause
stupid.
it for 1 second. When you spend a minute and a half or 2 minutes on being a joke, being facetious.
I'm riffing.
If you've got to follow that up by saying, like, you may sense that I'm being mocking a little bit, you may need to maybe take a learning annex class in communications. I'm just saying, if you have to tell everybody you're joking, you may need some work on it.
Improv classes.
But here you go. He is referring to the writing about a movie, and I guess there's been a lot of writing about it. It's been a cultural phenomenon. I don't know. To be honest with you, I wasn't aware of any of this. But it's apparently the biggest thing that's happening in Ben Shapiro's world. But how is that identity politics? What politics are we talking about? The showbiz politics?
The politics of representation.
The politics of representation in film. Continue here.
Deeply, deeply important. Black children everywhere will now believe that they too can be superheroes who jump off cars in fictional countries. It's very important. Now, you may sense that I'm mocking a little bit. The reason I'm mocking a little bit is because I hate this kind of identity politics. I think it's incredibly stupid. I think it's incredibly stupid because, again, I grew up as an Orthodox Jewish kid where no American president has been Jewish. And no American president has been an Orthodox Jew. And yet, I grew up on 1776, essentially worshiping the founding fathers.
Pause it for 1 second.
None of whom were Jewish.
Wait a second. That's it. It's over, right? Yeah. So let me see if I get this straight. He hates identity politics that is represented by people being excited about a movie that takes place in an all-black world with a black superhero. And his main argument as to why it's stupid is that he's Jewish. And he grew up as a Jew, an Orthodox Jew, and doesn't have any role models in the presidency for being Jewish, but he still overcame that to like 1776. Does anybody see the flaw in that argument? You're going to criticize fake identity politics by citing your own identity as proof as to why identity politics are bad. And Ben Shapiro takes issue with the New York Times writing about it. Part of the emotional and visual appeal of Black Panther lies in the fact that Wakanda has never been colonized.
And then Stephen Heck found this other tweet.
And he says, wait, go back. He says, Wakanda does not exist. As if you can't speak of a piece of art or culture and talk about the dynamic, the logical dynamic in there. And it's interesting to envision a world that is black, but has no vestige of what the vast majority of black countries in this world has experienced. He does not want you to look at fiction in that way. It is silly and stupid. And what's the next tweet?
God, he's such a sophist.
Oh, it was from almost 8 years ago. Why is it that every decent military commander in Westeros get killed, but the ones who royally suck do fine? Hashtag Game of Thrones. Hello, Westeros does not exist.
Well, that's a classic bit of Ben Shapiro's sophistry, is to argue with a point that nobody is making.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I will say, I don't think he's making this point at all, but I do see a certain subsection of liberals, usually white ones, performing this kind of performative allyship where representation becomes their only politics. And
I am
that is
absolutely
not
sure
helpful.
there is a person who did that.
Can I read you this tweet from this person?
Sure.
She says, "So I carefully did not buy Black Panther tickets for opening weekend because I did not want to be the white person sucking black joy out of the theater. What's the appropriate date for me to buy tickets? Is next weekend okay? Question mark."
I mean, assuming that's a serious...
Oh, it's serious.
I mean, who cares? I mean, you could find, I'm sure, a person who has said that, but I haven't heard. I mean,
I think they're in the minority for sure.
I think that's even.
I think most people just think this movie is cool, and that is fine.
That's the big problem. No one's making claims. No one in the black community, and okay, maybe I'm not as plugged in as I should be, is making claims that this is on par with like civil rights. It's a movie they're happy to see that like doesn't revolve around like a white guy being the hero.
You don't think that there is broad institutional support within the black community that this is as important as the repeal of Jim Crow laws?
Ben kind of has me shaken about that.
I mean, we saw it with Wonder Woman too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
There's this legion of people like Ben Shapiro saying this is stupid. Girls are in movies, and also like that is something that I think is concealed in his sort of disingenuous sophistry. I think he actually is pissed off that there is an all-black movie, and he doesn't want to admit it. But you know, on the other hand, there's a vocal minority of liberals who think that this is the be-all and end-all of progressive advancement of women, and that is also ridiculous.
I bet there is a vocal minority of every group of people that you could find that would also be on loot. But I don't know who that woman is that the tweet you read off, but
I didn't want to name her and shame her.
I feel like there's a lot of liberals who tweet at me, and I haven't heard any of that.
One aside from that little Easter egg was that Ben Shapiro was talking about how much he loves 1776. And in the New York Times feature, they wrote up about him and their classic, like, what's really going on with the right these days? They talked about Ben Shapiro growing up. He dressed up as John Adams every year for Halloween from the age of 5. And 1776 is his favorite musical.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Wow. I have never wanted to shove someone in a locker more.
I need to figure out how to work the reverb on this board so I can do that inside a locker thing every time we do Ben Shapiro clips from now on.
It would make them much easier to take.
Wakanda. Actually, that would be a really funny rant to hear that in. Wakanda. It's a fake place.